On today's episode, I've got Matt Thompson, the President and Chief Commercial Officer at Socure, and a great all-around guy. Excited to be chatting today.
Thank you. Yeah, great to be here with you. Thank you, Mikey.
Yeah, so Matt, maybe before we get into the kind of nitty-gritty of the story that you want to get into today, maybe can you set the stage a little bit about kind of who you are and your role within Socure, and then we'll get into some more detail.
Yeah, so I spent the first kind of decade of my professional career in the Army as an officer, and spent 4 of those years in Iraq and Afghanistan leading special operations forces. Went to business school after military service, started my first company there, a company that is ID.me, and really got into the identity space and fraud fighting, by trying to help protect veteran benefits from fraud and people that were committing what was called stolen valor at the time, but really fell in love with building businesses, growing teams, and finding ways to solve problems for companies. And from ID.me, I spent a couple years leading the consumer identity team over at Capital One and externalizing Capital One's identity services, really helping Cap One make this transition into being a technology provider to the market. And then I spent a few years running an operating business for a private equity firm. The company was called Identity. I led their identity business for North America. And then for the last 5 years, I've been working with Socure, which is the leading provider of identity verification, fraud prevention, risk decisioning, and we support more than 3,000 customers today.
Yeah, we've obviously worked together for some time now, and I just sincerely respect you as a leader and the way you conduct your organization, and always really interested how like the military background and some of the values that you took from that training back in the day have been applied in such a constructive way to the business lens. And we could probably spend an entire session on that. But I know it's not necessarily the focus today, but just want to call it out in a public forum how much I respect you.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would say on that, Mikey, and again, that's, probably different content for a different day, but the thing that you said that I would emphasize is the values piece. And, the military, you learn a lot about the importance of values, and the values in the Army are spell leadership, and it's loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, personal courage. And if you take the first letter of each of those words, it's LRDSHIP, for leadership. Those are our values. But what I learned and what I carried forward with me into the kind of civilian workforce is when you're really clear on your values, it makes your decision-making process very clear and efficient. And so I think it helps you as a leader make better decisions when you're clear on what you value. And so I've always, values kind of evolve over time individually, but they are different organizations. So really plugging in and learning what the organization values is important in the way you adapt your leadership. So thanks for calling that out.
Yeah, of course. And we might get into a little bit more of that as we talk about some of the Socure leadership values that we've worked on in the past, and kind of identifying that amongst the team. But maybe can you set the stage on the Socure side a little bit? Like as you know, on every episode of the podcast, we get into a story of a blind spot within the go-to-market org that you identified in your time at a company, and how did you kind of peel back the layers of that onion and figure out what to do about it and how to make things better? So can you maybe set some stage here about what happened at Socure that you want to dive into?
Yeah, so I am unprompted, by the way, for the audience, going to bring up something that is what actually brought me together with you, Mikey, in terms of the blind spot that we were trying to solve through, our partnership with Lumopath. But when I took over leading the commercial organization about 2 years ago, and I've been with Socure for coming up on 5 years, and before that I was the general manager for the public sector business. But when I took over the entire commercial go-to-market team, I was, and it was at a time where, everyone in SaaS in particular was very focused on growth efficiency. So like, how are you growing, but doing it responsibly? And it was, we were well past the growth at all costs kind of model,
Yep.
that a lot of companies got really burned by. And so I was trying to figure out as we continue to grow, 50, 60, 70% year over year, which is what the growth rate's been for the last few years. How do we do that in a very efficient manner? And, as I was structuring the teams to align them to markets and customers, I didn't have a good sense of how much time were people spending on different customers and then different kinds of activities within the support of those customers. And as I was looking at, how do I add, resources, and where can I, drive better automation or use of AI to just create efficiencies within our go-to-market org and customer, which also, by the way, includes customer success, customer support. Right. And I just had, no visibility. And where it became really the most apparent was when I was doing a very large negotiation contract renewal. And I was involved with it because it was a several $1 million a year customer. And we were putting together kind of I'd call it a justification to substantiate a portion of our renewal. And it was really around all the services that we had been providing to this customer. And it took way too much effort and way too much time for the team to really come back and say, well, this is how many hours a week, a month, a year we're providing to this customer. And these are the kinds of support activities we're doing on a routine basis that we don't think they have visibility of or value. And so really being able to first and foremost have data to understand where my team was spending time across different customers with different types of activities, as well as when we went customer facing on renewals, and again, we have several thousand customers, so we're constantly doing renewals, and I want to make sure that we're able to very clearly and substantially articulate what things of value we're doing to support these customers. We had no visibility, no data. Right. And it was a huge gap for me to continue to drive growth efficiency while making sure that we were providing, really great customer support in a way that our customers had visibility and understood that, as well as we had visibility and understood as well. So those were, and I guess if I would click one more, level into this, as we started getting more visibility because of the work that we did with Lumopath, and again, I'm cognizant not to make this a Lumopath pitch, but at the end of the day, Lumopath really helped us see that we were spending, too much time, I would say, on lower value, lower growth customers relative to the higher growth customers and the higher impact customers. So it really gave me the ability to redistribute kind of workload and focus. I'm a big, going back to the military thing, I'm a big focus guy. Like I really like to keep the team hyper focused on the things that matter most. And, and again, without that data visibility, man, we were just, we were operating off a gut, and you got to be a lot better than that in this day and age.
Yeah, totally. And there's a lot that you said to unpack there. So I want to hit upon a couple of points. You brought up, first of all, one that we didn't really talk about in the early days that's interesting to me. There's like both the customer facing as well as the internal like efficiency play that are both created off of the same data point, right? Like how much time are we spending on customers, but it can impact both upsell opportunity and renewal, as well as just purely building a more efficient operating engine. I'm curious, is that something that you, was there one side of that equation that was like more important than the other? Or was it like, you know what, they're equally important. We need to be upselling, and we think there's a lot of untapped opportunity for revenue through services. And on the other hand, we need to be doing things more efficiently. Just kind of curious where you focused first.
I mean, I think we, in today's environment, I mean, you're expected to be able to do both exceptionally well.
Yeah.
I mean, the competition for capital is really intense. The competition for, customer attention is really intense. And, the expectations that board members have in particular related to growth is higher than it's ever been. So you've got to be able to navigate both of those things and then some.
Yeah.
And so again, I think you have to set up your systems, your data visibility in a way that helps you be able to do those things, and then a lot of other things as well as a leader in my spot to do that all well at the same time.
Yeah, and so I guess like I'm totally fair that it's do them both. When you went through that exercise, like with that one renegotiation that you were going through, like what was the without Lumopath, like just like for an organization that's not using us, like what was the tool? I know you're very well resourced, so like how were you putting it together? Was it like let's look at Salesforce, let's like what was that exercise?
Yeah. So I mean, people were going back through and looking at recurring meetings and the number of the types of people, the number of people that we were bringing into these recurring meetings, just from calendars, as well as looking back. We do a lot of data studies. We're a data science company, and so we looked back at the number of proofs of value or data studies that we did for this particular customer. And then analysis associated with that, hours spent, doing analysis. And, some of our customers are it's very labor intensive and expensive to support banks, and I often tell them that we'd give them better pricing if they weren't so hard to support,
Right.
and so expensive to support, but they just are. And so, but we had to do a lot of manual pulls, and yes, I mean, we used some of our tooling, but it was all kind of all over the place, if you will.
Yeah.
And, again, that's, today now, I mean, I think the expectation of, people in my seat who are running, large commercial organizations are expecting a way to pull all that together, and then make it intelligent in the way that it's served up to you so that you can, either write a query or some prompt to get, some kind of data insight that you want across n number of different data sources. Or, but yeah, I mean, I think, the ability to tie that together and help me make more informed budget decisions in terms of where I was adding resources across the org, what functional types of resources, and then, as I work closely with my RevOps partners who are my right hand, running the go-to-market organization, it's like, where do we automate? Where do we, where do we find the efficiencies in this, kind of new visibility that we have across the team's activities?
Yeah, and that leads me to follow up that I've spoken with some folks in the past where like a data point I always pull up that is a fascinating one. Like we had a customer that 44% of their company's time was going to 8% of their revenue, like a complete mismatch of time versus revenue. And I think every company has some version of that. And
that happens
in the call.
That happens all over the place.
Yeah. And the feedback that I got or I get sometimes is like, okay, but like, what are we going to do about it? Like that, like we're still going to service those customers. I have a very visceral reaction and my own thoughts on it, but kind of going back to your story at Socure and how you were identifying those similar mismatches that you were referring to, like, can you maybe get into a little bit more of like, okay, we have a problem, we have a mismatch. What do you actually do about it? Like, do you have any specifics that you were able to execute that took this from something that was just a blatant misallocation to a solved problem and a reallocation, if you will?
Yeah, well, I mean, first we had a similar problem that was discovered at the beginning. I hadn't been able to have visibility across a team of, what is now 200 people, which I now have visibility across the whole team of, their activities related to the revenue associated to the activities they were working on, like, and to be able to identify that mismatch, as well as like the other piece of this that I think is important, but we haven't touched on yet is kind of all of our companies at our stages, and everyone listening to this has the same problem of like, redlining kind of your employee base, and especially redlining your kind of most valuable players, because they're the ones that, our stage of hyperscale, everybody is going to those people as you're adding new headcount to try to, or they're the most in demand for your most valuable customers, right? So like you have this tendency of, redlining certain people for too long of a period. And I had no visibility into that either. I knew it was happening because I could see it on their face, but I didn't have any data. Like, and I just don't have time to go and look at people's calendars. That's not something I even have time to do, So like understanding in this bigger picture of how am I managing the organization through this, and how can I make changes to distribute workload better, goes back to the, what do you do about it? One of the things is make sure that you're not burning out your most valuable players on these, biggest customers, which is probably a common tendency. But further, I think really getting, what the data did was drive a lot of valuable discussions on the backside of that. So, having the data as a starting point, but then going, as you're saying, and doing something about it. I pulled these account teams together. We looked at the data together. We said, okay, how can we get more efficient, or where can we pull people off of this to go do other things on more high value accounts? But I think not everyone, but I think it's very common for organizations to have a disproportionate amount of time and resources spent on the not on the top revenue accounts. And so the data drove the discussions that drove changes in terms of how we align to accounts, and what headcount, what functional areas we needed to scale out and provide more resources to relative to others.
Yeah, totally. And it's so interesting to me when I speak with, obviously one day we aspire to be where you are as a company, but we're at a completely different stage. But like, it's the same questions. Like it's just at a different scale, and we're doing the exact same things right now of like, which customers are we over investing in, and what are the work, like the tasks that we are doing that we need to be hiring for, offloading, automating. It never ends, is I guess the fascinating piece. It's like, it's just a different equation at each stage of the game, but we're a fraction of your size dealing with the same.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the difference is, and again, I've been at your stage of company as a founder, and so I understand that stage relative to this stage. But I think, it just becomes like this. Yes, the scale matters, and being able to manage that, at scale, you really need the data in a platform like Lumopath to pull so much stuff together. Because at your stage, you're kind of involved in every single thing pretty closely. And so you got a good, your finger on the pulse is able to kind of help you drive decisions. But, once you get kind of Series B and beyond, like you really need a more sophisticated platform to help you make better data-driven insights on resource allocation, support, budget planning, and just to communicate value to your customers as well. I think all those things require really intelligent, data-driven decisions.
Yeah, well said. And I guess as we wrap up the conversation, because I know we're at time, we're already at 30. This is flying by, man.
We got so much to talk about. This is great.
Yeah. I mean, we can part two it, but I am curious. I mean, but like, to not cut you off, is there like the single most important thing that you would want someone to take away from this? A sentence for GTM leaders, or the most important management lesson that you might have discovered as it relates to this challenge that we've been talking about?
The single most, that's a big responsibility. I listen to a lot of these podcasts because I'm constantly growing and developing myself. I just think, maybe it became apparent to me, and probably later than it should have been, meaning like invest in this earlier in the process of getting that good, I probably went too long before we had this kind of data insight to drive better decisions. I wish I could have, backed up several quarters and had something like this in place sooner. I will say I'm really glad that I have the insight, and we've been much smarter in our, we do get benchmarked in growth efficiency, and Lumopath has helped us be a leader in that category. But I would say, it was something that I wish I would have done, earlier to make better decisions out of the gate or sooner in the process. But the one thing I would add that I think is really important for GTM leaders today, and really more than, I've been building businesses for the last 16 years now, and I think now more than ever, there's so much, fear, I would say, and so much like uncertainty and tools and platforms that are being thrown at you or pitched to you on how to, and I guess the fear part is like the fear of falling behind. And there's a healthy aspect to that fear for sure. But I also think, and we did this together, by the way, but I think it's an important lesson for all GTM leaders is like, I think it's important not to try too many things at once, and to make sure that you're bringing your teams and your leaders along the process with you, and, making it really clear, what is the scope? What are we trying to accomplish? Be very open and transparent with them. And then, provide a lot of training throughout any test period so that people understand the KPIs and they feel like they're being brought along the process, and that they're being trained on how to use the tools and the platforms to get the most out of what you're trying to accomplish. But there's a tendency, and I talk to a lot of go-to-market leaders. I value my network in that area. A lot of them, and I at times feel overwhelmed, but I've been very disciplined and structured about the way that we test and roll out new things to the org, so that we're not distracting people. We're not overwhelming them with yet another tool they need to learn or start using. But we're doing it in a really structured and thoughtful way.
Right. Yeah, that was, we've seen it across the board with folks that we've piloted with that have gone well. You can see when an organization knows how to run a pilot, and obviously we can do our job to support that, but it helps when you have a counterpart that is intentional in the way that they're running things, and not piloting 15 things at once with the exact same user group that they're just like completely overloaded. So yeah,
it sounds obvious, but I promise you that it's not common practice.
No, totally. Well said. And again, I appreciate all the Lumopath call outs, and that means the world when our partners are seeing value, and that becomes part of their success story. So I appreciate you being on and sharing some stories. We can do a part 2. We can do a one with a little bit more time in the future, but yeah, really appreciate your time, Matt.
Yeah, thank you, Mikey. Appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
Of course.